A lot of people only know San Lorenzo Island from a distance. They see it from Callao every day, but they've never set foot on that massive rock sitting out there in the sea. I grew up watching it. As a kid, I'd sit on the waterfront, watch the ships, and there in the background, always, the island. My dad used to say that place held things that never made the news, that everything had happened there. Sick people left in isolation, people buried far from the city, military business, bad people's business, all kinds of things. And among all those stories, there was one that kept coming up more than the others. The one about La Gringa without a head, a foreign woman, they say, blonde, who was killed in a terrible way on that island, decapitated, and who has been appearing ever since, moving through the fog, searching for what's missing. I had heard that story several times around the docks, but I always thought it was just a tale to scare newcomers, until I ended up working near the island. That's when things changed. My name is Jorge. I was born and raised in Callao. My whole life I've worked close to the sea, first hauling sacks at the port, then helping out on boats, then doing all kinds of jobs on vessels that patrolled the area, sometimes keeping watch, sometimes transporting things. Nothing glamorous, but it was work. The first time I heard people talk seriously about La Gringa was one night when we were anchored near the island. It was the early morning shift. The sea was calm, but the atmosphere wasn't. There was a thick fog covering almost everything. The island looked like a black shadow, darker than the sky itself. There were only a few of us on deck. One of the sailors, an older man, was drinking coffee when, out of nowhere, he said, "Has anyone told you about the Headless Gringa yet?" We laughed. We thought he was starting a joke. "She appears around here," he said. "If you see her, don't stare too long." Nobody took him seriously. I made fun of it too, to be honest. In Callao, there's always someone with stories. But you could tell the old man wasn't joking. "It happened to me," he said after a moment, "and I wouldn't wish it on anyone." He went quiet and didn't want to say anything more. I didn't take it very seriously right then, but those words stayed with me. You don't forget when someone says, "I've seen her," with that look on their face. Over the years, I pieced together fragments of the story. Nobody tells it the same way, but they all say more or less the same thing. That during a dark time in Peru, when there were armed groups, kidnappings, all of that, a foreign woman arrived in the country. Some say she was a tourist. Others say she came to investigate, to write reports, to photograph things she wasn't supposed to photograph. They say she started asking uncomfortable questions, that she took photos of important people, that she saw things she wasn't meant to see, and that someone decided to silence her. They say they put her on a boat and took her to San Lorenzo Island. Out there, they beat her, tied her down, made her suffer. And in the end, so no one would recognize her, they cut off her head and buried her somewhere on the island, in some random hole, like she was trash, her body in one place, her head who knows where. Over time, people started saying that on certain nights, especially when the fog drops low and the sea turns strange, you can see a woman walking or floating near the island. A woman in a light-colored dress, with no head. And that is La Gringa. That's what they say. I didn't fully believe any of it, until one summer night. We went out with a group of young officers who wanted to get close to the island to survey the area. You know the type, people who want to see it up close, take notes, check it out for themselves. We left almost at midnight. The sea was dark. The lights of Callao looked far away, like they belonged to another city. The island ahead was a black mass. As we moved forward, one of the officers started talking about La Gringa, whether she was really blonde, whether she still wore the dress, whether she really had no head. I said nothing. I don't like talking about those things when I'm on the water. We stopped at a certain distance from the island. They turned off some of the lights to see the coastline better. Only the dimmer lights and the flashlights were left on. The fog started coming in hard. It looked like smoke. It crept in from every direction. I was leaning against the railing, looking toward the island, when I saw something. At first I thought it was just a cluster of rocks, the kind that stick out near the shoreline, some dark shapes in the water. But then one of those shapes moved. It rose up, and it took the shape of a person, the figure of a woman. She was wearing a light dress, like it was clinging to her body from the water. It came down to about her knees. Her arms hung down at her sides, still, and where her head should have been, there was nothing. Not that you couldn't see it clearly. No, there was simply no head there. I froze. I felt the blood drain from my feet. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like when you know a crash is about to happen and you still can't stop watching. Next to me, one of the sailors whispered, "Are you seeing this?" That's when I understood it wasn't just me. The figure began to move forward, as if walking. But her feet didn't sink into the water or make any splash. It was more like she was gliding across the surface. At one point, she stopped. She turned to face us, or what would be facing us if she had a face. And right then, as strange as it sounds, I felt like she was looking at me. Yes, no eyes, no head. But I felt it clearly, that sensation of someone staring directly at you. Nobody said a word. The sea lapped softly against the hull. Everything else was silence. Then, from behind us came a shout. "Don't look at her!" It was the old sailor's voice, the same man who had talked about La Gringa years before. "Lower your eyes," he repeated. "Don't look at her directly." His tone wasn't a joke. It was an order. I reacted like someone had grabbed me by the collar. I looked away, stared down at the deck, at the wet metal under my feet. I don't know how much time passed. It was seconds, but it felt like much more. One of the officers, maybe out of pride, switched on a flashlight and pointed it toward where we'd seen the figure. The light swept across the water, lit up the rocks along the shore. And there was nothing. No dress, no figure, no missing head, nothing. Just the stones and the shifting fog. "Must have been a rock," the officer said, forcing a small laugh. But for those of us who had seen it, there was nothing to laugh about. We finished the job as fast as we could and headed back to the dock. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was standing beside my bed. No footsteps, nothing to see. But my body would tense up on its own, the way it does when you sense someone behind you. Weeks later, another group went out near the island. I wasn't on that trip, but I knew one of the guys on board, a young kid, the type who thought he was fearless. When they came back, I could see something was off. Sunken eyes, serious face. Nothing like the guy who was always cracking jokes. I walked over to him. "What happened?" I said. "Did they mess with you or what?" He stayed quiet, looking at the floor. "We heard her," he said finally. "Who?" "La Gringa, man." My stomach tightened. He told me that while they were near the island, everyone suddenly felt something scraping along the hull of the boat, on the side facing the open sea. They figured it was a net, a plastic bag, something like that. But then they heard a voice. A woman's voice, very soft, like it was pressed right against the side of the boat, speaking from the water. It wasn't Spanish. It sounded like English, but muffled, faint. Some only heard whispers. Others swore they could make out individual words. Help. Please. Cold. Things like that. The guy telling me the story leaned in too close to the railing, trying to hear better. And he felt, clearly, something grab his wrist. He didn't see a hand, didn't see an arm, but the pull was so strong he almost went headfirst into the water. Another crew member grabbed him by the jacket and yanked him back inside the boat. When he fell, he hit his head against a metal part and blacked out for a few seconds. When he came to, he was drenched in sweat, with a mark on his arm like something had squeezed it hard. From that day on, he refused to go back to that area. He asked to be reassigned, and not long after, he quit the job entirely. "It's not a game," he told me. "There's something out there. Whatever it is, it doesn't want to be alone." Some time later, one night when we were back on land, I sat down to talk with the old sailor, the one who had yelled at us not to look at her. He lit a cigarette, stared out at the dark sea, and said, "When someone dies suffering with fear, they don't leave quickly. They stay attached." According to him, La Gringa was a woman who arrived trusting people, who thought she could stick her nose into everything, who never imagined what was going to happen to her. "They betrayed her," he said. "They beat her. They took everything from her. And on top of that, they cut off her head. You tell me how a soul like that is going to leave in peace." For him, the island is like a prison for whatever is left of her. Her body is in one place, her head is in another, and her soul doesn't know where it belongs, he explained. That's why she appears incomplete. That's why she looks the way she does. What stayed with me the most was when he said, "And sometimes, when she looks at you, because according to him, even without a head, she still looks. She's measuring whether you could take her place." I don't know if that's true, but ever since he said it, whenever I'm near the island, I make sure to stay well away from the railing. Today, I no longer work in the same place. Life took me somewhere else. But every time I go back to Callao and see San Lorenzo Island in the distance, I think about those nights, about the fog, about the black water, about that figure in the light dress standing where no one else could stand. The story keeps going. Now, it's told by fishermen, sailors, tourists, and YouTubers who go on exploration trips to film paranormal footage near the island. Some will say it's all made up, that it's just stories to get views, to scare the newcomers. I always say the same thing. I know what I saw. I know what I heard happened to others. And that's enough for me. If you ever go to the island, if you're ever in Callao and it crosses your mind to get on a boat to take a close look at San Lorenzo Island, remember this. Don't call her by her nickname. Don't provoke her. Don't throw rocks or make noise just to see if something happens. And if through the fog you see something that looks like a woman in a light dress standing on the water or on the rocks, don't stare too long, especially if you suddenly feel your body go cold. Because there are places that hold things we don't understand. And off the coast of Callao, on that island that looks quiet but has seen so many things, they say a woman still wanders there. One who doesn't know where they left her head. And until she finds it, she may keep looking for someone else to take her place.